Imagine you're living 10,000 years ago. There's no Netflix, no social media, no video games. You're exhausted from hunting. Your body aches. And then one day you stumble upon something that completely changes how you feel. Something that makes the pain disappear, that makes you see the world differently, that makes you feel euphoric. The question is, how far back does this story actually go? When did ancient humans first discover ways to alter their consciousness? And more importantly, why? Stay with me because the answer is way older than you probably think, and it completely changes how we understand human nature itself. Let's start with something most people don't realize. Your brain has naturally occurring chemicals that can make you feel incredible without any external substance involved. But humans didn't just accept the baseline happiness their brains produced. At some point, thousands of years before recorded history, our ancestors figured out that certain plants, certain fungi, certain naturally occurring substances could amplify those feelings. They could make you feel better than better. They could make you feel transcendent. The earliest evidence we have suggests that humans were experimenting with mind-altering substances at least 12,000 years ago. Some researchers argue it goes back even further, but let's focus on what we can actually prove. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The very first substances ancient humans discovered weren't necessarily drugs in the way we think about them today. They were often found completely by accident. Imagine you're an early human gathering plants and roots to eat. You try something unfamiliar. Your vision gets blurry. Your thoughts become strange. Your body feels light. Most people would think they were dying, but some people wanted to feel that way again. One of the oldest documented instances involves alcohol, and we actually covered that in another video. But the story of getting high goes back even further than drinking beer or wine. Ancient humans were chewing plants that would alter their consciousness possibly 20,000 years ago. Here's a specific example that blew my mind when I first learned about it. Archaeological evidence from the Middle East and Central Asia shows that humans were using opium poppies as early as 6000 BCE. But here's the crazy part. They weren't using them for pain relief initially. They were using them to feel good. The pain relief was almost a bonus discovery that came later. They knew these plants made them feel different, made them feel euphoric, and that alone was enough reason to seek them out, prepare them, and use them repeatedly. But opium wasn't the first thing humans got high on, and that's the really fascinating part. Long before opium, humans were discovering mushrooms and fungi that contained psilocybin. These psychedelic mushrooms grow naturally in many parts of the world. There's evidence that ancient civilizations in Mesoamerica were using these mushrooms in religious and spiritual ceremonies, possibly as far back as 10,000 years ago. The mushrooms didn't just make people feel good, they made people feel like they were communicating with the divine. And in those ancient cultures, that was the entire point. Think about this differently for a second. What if the human drive to alter consciousness is actually older than agriculture? What if it's not a modern problem or a modern desire? What if it's fundamentally part of what makes us human? Evidence suggests this might actually be true. Across completely different civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, humans independently discovered the exact same plants and fungi that could alter their consciousness. In South America, they found coca leaves and eventually cocaine. In Central Asia, they found cannabis. In Africa and the Middle East, they found various plants containing psychoactive compounds. In Asia, they found different mushrooms and botanical compounds. What are the odds that all of these separate civilizations, completely isolated from each other, would all pursue the exact same behavior unless there was something fundamentally human about it? This suggests that the desire to alter consciousness isn't something modern society created. It's not something television or peer pressure invented. It's something that's been wired into human nature for at least 10,000 years, probably much longer. Now, let's talk about how ancient humans actually consumed these substances, because the methods are pretty fascinating. For plants like poppies and coca leaves, they would sometimes chew them directly. They would grind them into powders and mix them with other plants. Some civilizations brewed them into teas, others made pastes. The creativity ancient humans showed in figuring out how to extract and consume these substances is actually pretty remarkable, especially considering they had no chemistry education, no scientific method, and no way to measure dosages. Archaeological evidence shows that by 3000 BCE, opium use was widespread enough that it was documented in ancient texts. The ancient Sumerians had a word for the opium poppy. They called it the joy plant. The Egyptians were using opium by 2000 BCE, and by the time you get to the ancient Greeks and Romans, opium use was absolutely commonplace. But again, all of this happened thousands of years after humans first discovered these consciousness altering substances. Here's something else that changes how we think about ancient humans. Many of the substances they discovered weren't just recreational, they had genuine medicinal applications. Opium reduced pain. Cannabis reduced nausea and helped with various ailments. Some of the South American plants helped with altitude sickness. Some of the African plants had anti-malarial properties. So ancient humans weren't necessarily making a clear distinction between getting high and medicine. Many of these substances did both simultaneously. And in fact, that brings us to a really important point. The oldest cultures in the world, the ones that survived the longest, often incorporated these substances into their spiritual and religious practices. The shamans knew which plants to use, how to use them, and why. These substances weren't chaotic or destructive in those contexts. They were integrated into a larger cultural framework. They had meaning and purpose. It wasn't until much later, when these substances were extracted from their original cultural context and commercialized, that they became what we think of as the drug problem. But that's a different story for a different video. The real answer to our question, when did ancient humans first get high, is that we honestly don't know for certain. The earliest evidence we have with reasonable archaeological backing takes us to at least 6,000 years ago with opium and possibly 10,000 years ago with psilocybin mushrooms and other naturally occurring psychoactive compounds. But the truth is, humans probably discovered consciousness-altering substances long before we have any evidence of it. Maybe 15,000 years ago, maybe 20,000, maybe even longer. What we can say with confidence is this: the moment humans discovered fire, the moment they developed language, the moment they figured out how to survive in harsh environments, they were also figuring out which plants and fungi made them feel different. It was all part of the same process of exploration and experimentation that defines our species. And perhaps that tells us something profound about human nature itself. We're not satisfied with the baseline. We're curious. We're explorers. We push boundaries. We want to know what lies beyond the limits of normal experience. Those are the same instincts that led to science, to art, to music, to all the things that make us human. The desire to alter consciousness might actually be inseparable from the desire to understand the world and ourselves. So the next time someone tells you that getting high is a modern problem or a sign of weakness or moral decay, remember this: your ancestors were doing it 10,000 years ago. They were gathering plants, experimenting with fungi, and discovering ways to expand their consciousness. It's one of the oldest, most universal human behaviors we know about. The question isn't why humans get high. The question is, what does the universality and antiquity of this behavior tell us about who we are as a species? And that's something worth thinking about. If you found this deep dive into ancient human behavior as fascinating as I did, you'd probably love some of our other videos. We've got content about why ancient humans started smoking, how they handled their periods, what they did all day, and plenty more stuff that completely changes how you think about human history. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so you never miss a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.